Again, it's an anti-inflammatory. Antioxidants such as vitamin D, which reduce oxidative damage, and omega-3 fatty acids that evidently help to clear the cholesterol out. All three of these in retrospective studies indicate that people who take these in fairly high doses, and especially the aspirin, have less of a chance of being Alzheimer's disease. And we have our picture of it, right? So, useful this thing is. NSAIDs work through inflammation, omega-3 fatty acids through cholesterol buildup, and vitamin E through the oxidation. Now, this is an example of what happens, for example. When you look at the vitamin E treatments for mice, they're extraordinarily effective in the mouse models. They're minimally effective in humans. It's just not that close in role. So, before I go on to the third part of the talk, I want to tell you just how difficult it is to get a drug into trial. Okay? It's easy enough for scientists like us to do work on hundreds of different compounds. And we do. It's fascinating to us. We open the doors to what's actually happening in the disease. But once we find a promising compound, it gets into the clinical trial realm. And that's where the difficulty begins. A clinical trial is a prospective study, meaning that you're going to start it and look at the future, as opposed to a retrospective study where you look back to see what people have not gotten a disease. That compares the effect of some intervention against a control. So half the people or more than half the people will get your drug, and some people will not get the drug, because you have to compare the two. First, in phase 1, the most important thing is you administer a drug and make sure it doesn't kill anybody. Because there's a lot of drugs that have done this, right? If you've ever seen what a rat, a mouse, or a dog can eat, you know that they're not like us, right? Take the things that they can take in their bodies. So it's a small study to look to see whether it's toxic. These are not given against people with the disease. Phase 2, a small group of people with the disease, and you're mostly seeing whether or not there's any effect at all on the disease, and whether it's not toxic, or where the toxicity is. And then phase 3, you test the effectiveness. Large group of people, okay? At the end of phase 3, this is a large group of people, it's usually multi-center studies. The end of phase 3, if it looks both like it helps the condition and that it's not toxic, it's approved as a drug and put out. The important thing to remember is to be approved for a drug by the FDA, you merely have to show some very small improvement, as long as the drug is not toxic. They're not saying that this drug is fantastic or wonderful. They're just saying it's something you can take, it might help a little bit, and it's not too toxic. And then phase 4. Phase 4 continues on once you start giving the drug to people. This is what happened to Vioxx. Vioxx got through phase 3, went out to the general population, but it was still under clinical trial. Okay, so once it had been given to millions of people, then they discovered that there's a toxic effect and pulled it from the market. Now for the difficulty. 10% of compounds that go to clinical trial make it to market. As a scientist, we are taught that 1% of the compounds you work on as a scientist will make it to that point. Okay? So you're talking about a very narrow window of compounds. 10 to 12 years from the time you develop something that looks like it would work until the time it actually gets to patients. That's why telling you about what's in phase 3 clinical trials today is going to be the important thing. The average cost for medicine to get to market, $800 million. It's a huge amount of money that costs to get these in the trial. And of that, after all that's done, only 3 in 10 of the products that do win the gold crown only make their money back, the drug companies.